Hello and welcome to my channel Happy Hours. In my last video, I discussed about the Cold War, NATO, Warsaw Pact and the non-aligned movement. In this video, I am going to discuss about little more about the Cold War, an incident which occurred during the Cold War, which was known as Cuban Missile Crisis, end of Cold War, state of affairs in USSR, drawbacks of Soviet system, reasons for disintegration, its consequences, and about the foreign policy. The foreign policy which is adopted by India also. So, what are we waiting for? Let's jump to the first topic, which is the Cold War era. We all know after the Second World War between the 1945 to 1991, the two power blocs were fighting a war, or we can say the USA and USSR tried to prove their superiority. They were trying to influence the world with their ideology, socialism and capitalism respectively. There was one incident happened in the period which was about to turn the Cold War to hot war. It is also known as the Cuban Missile Crisis. It is also known as the October Crisis in Cuba or Caribbean Crisis. It was a 13-day confrontation between the government of United States and the Soviet Union, when the American deployments of nuclear missiles in Italy and Turkey were matched by the Soviet deployments of nuclear missiles in Cuba. This crisis lasted from 16 to 28 October 1962. This confrontation is widely considered the closest the Cold War came to escalating into full-scale nuclear war. US attacks the way of pigs, but they got defeated. Now let us understand what was the result of this war. Conflict resolved diplomatically. Publicized removal of Soviet nuclear missiles from the Cuba. Removal of American nuclear missiles from Turkey and Italy. Agreement with the Soviet Union that the United States would never invade Cuba without direct provocation. Creation of a nuclear hotline between the United States and the Soviet Union. Now let us understand how the Cold War ended. The Cold War ended with disintegration of USSR in the year 1990 to 1991. There were 15 states of USSR. Those were Russia, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Armenia, Azerbaijan, Kazakhstan, Ukraine, Belarus, Uzbekistan, Moldova, Georgia, Turkmenistan, Kyrgyzstan, and Tajikistan. These 15 republics, which were part of USSR, now became individual countries. They were all following socialism. They were having common market. Export was free, and there were no tariffs charged on the goods. Even traveling between these two states were visa free. But after the disintegration, this all changed. And this event clearly marked the victory of capitalism bloc led by USA. It was the ideology of socialism which lost to the idea of capitalism. Now let us understand the state of affairs in USSR. The government is ensured minimum standard of living to all the citizens like healthcare, housing, education, etc. They provided subsidies on basic necessities like food, healthcare, education, etc. So they say there will be no unemployment. According to the skill, everyone is going to get the employment. Land and other productive assets were owned by the government. So there was no privatization. So the profit is also not going to share by the people. Next, what were the drawbacks of Soviet society? First, it was bureaucratic and authoritarian. Implementation is not done. We can say the rules were made and the implementation is done according to their wish. What they were receiving from the top, they were they were just implementing it. They were not thinking what were the ground reality. So when some of them get power, they got arrogant even, and because of this complicancy started, because they do not tend to disburse the services even, since there were no elections. So they were continuously became more arrogant, and they were not following any rules, no democracy, and nobody was getting rejected from their place. This lead to unpeace, or we can say loss of peace. Next is the lack of democracy and freedom of speech. People cannot speak against the government. People were not supposed to gather, and they were not under consideration even. Unaccountable Communist Party, since there were no opposition. The single party rule, no one can criticize, so no one can change the government. Fourth and the last is the domination of Russia among other republics. Since Russia was the biggest among the all republic, so the USSR chief was Russian, Communist Party chief was Russian. So basically all the decisions were taken by the Russians. They were literally dominating the USSR countries. They were focused only on one thing, and that was the armed development and space research. But unfortunately, the research and the development were neglected. Whereas on other hand, USA was completely focused on research and development. Internet is an accidental development done by USA in 1949 by the Research and Development Department, which leads to productivity. So since Soviet Union, they were not looking for the research and the department, they were not working on it, they were lagging behind, because they were not unable to do any kind of revolution even like green revolution which were done in America. By the green revolution they were having the high yielding seals, so the product was also increased. People in USSR started understanding the standard of living in capitalist countries. They were able to compare that. They were understanding how rich and how peacefully they all are living, how luxury they are having or enjoying. To suppress this, USSR started giving more salary to the employees. If more money is provided, so and no research is being done, so the productivity is not going to increase, due to which goods will be very less. And since so the goods price is going to increase. If the price is increasing, it means inflation is also going to increase. So there was a great dissatisfaction among the people of Soviet Union. They were feeling of nationalism. All Republicans started thinking that they cannot survive as a part of Soviet Union. So they decided to disintegrate. Now let us understand in other words what were the reasons of disintegration. The first reason was the economic stagnation since 1970s. Resources were diverted towards nuclear arms and the developing satellite states. As I have discussed before also, that they were only focused on nuclear arms and developing the satellite states like Cuba were also one of them. Wages were increased, but productivity and technology did not. So this caused inflation, and because of this, the price of goods increased, but there was dissatisfaction. Second reason was the awareness among the citizens and their comparison with the development in the West. They were understanding the difference in between the capitalist and socialist countries. They were understanding the difference in between the living standard. So they were ready to disintegrate. Third reason was lethargic administration. Once you got the power, you are never going to work. And this is the truth. And this was happening in Soviet Union. So that was also the major reason. Rampant corruption, inability of the system to correct mistakes, lack of transparency, and concentration of power. Next and the last reason is the rise of nationalism and desire for sovereignty within various republics. Now let us understand the consequences of disintegration. First is the end of the Cold War. Since the other party, other bloc, which was USSR, it got dissolved, so the Cold War was also ended. Next was the power relations changed in world politics. The world transformed into a unipolar world. Now only USA became the only superpower. Russia and the other republics, they adopted capitalism, and that too with the help of USA. World Bank, IMF also helped to change or to adopt capitalism, and this phenomena is known as shock therapy. Now the USA became the superpower, or can say it became the hegemon of the world. But slowly, China, European Union, even India start rising. Now Japan and South Korea also changed. So the world transformed from bipolar to unipolar and then to multipolar. Next is the foreign policy topic. The concept of foreign policy refers to a document containing the general objection that guide the activities and relationships of one country on its interaction with the other country. India's foreign policy is fundamentally based on the principles of peaceful coexistence, friendship, and cooperation among the countries of the world irrespective of their political system. The main feature of India's foreign policy are first, mutual respect for each other, territorial integrity and sovereignty. Secondly, mutual non aggregation. Thirdly, mutual non interference. Fourth, equality and mutual benefit. And the last one is peaceful coexistence. There are five goals of foreign policy. First is maintaining national security. Second, to support democracy. Third, to promote world peace, providing aid and establishing open trade. The foreign policy is shaped by the domestic and international. Now, let us understand what was the history behind it. The foundations of Indian foreign policy were laid during independence struggle when our leaders fought the evils of colonialism and racism. In the year 1925, the Indian National Congress formed the Foreign Department. Their work was to get contract from outside for the indigenous industries and to publicize the Indian national struggle. At that time, we were not having sovereignty only. But when we got independence in the year 1947 and the government was formed in the year 1952, we got the independent foreign policy with sovereignty. But at the time of independence, economically India has been subjected to long colonial exploitation, due to which at the time of independence we were suffering from many economic ills like poor economic infrastructure, lack of capital and technology, poverty, unemployment, hunger, and poor health services. In order to overcome these evils, India needed foreign support in the form of capital and technology both. Thus, the fast economic growth became one of the primary objectives of India's foreign policy. In view of nascent democracy, India has to keep in mind the sensitivities of her social and cultural compositions. When India became independent, World War II had ended. and the new world order was emerging, led by two superpowers, NATO, which was led by USA, and Warsaw Pact, led by USSR, due to which Cold War was going on. India did not join any of these superpowers. Instead, with four other countries, formed the non-aligned movement. India's foreign policy is influenced by these international conditions also. Now, what is the formulation of foreign policy in India? Ideally, it should be the job of Ministry of External Affairs, but in the first ever cabinet of independent India, our first Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru held the portfolio of External Affairs too. Hence, since then, it has become a convention that the Prime Minister Office (PMO) formulates the foreign policy of India by taking inputs from the Ministry of External Affairs and Research (MEA) and Analysis Wing, which is known as RAW. India follows the Monroe Doctrine. It was adopted by James Monroe, the fifth president of USA. There are two aspects of Monroe Doctrine, and these are: avoid external influence in the internal matters, dominance in the neighborhood, which means the big brotherhood attitude. The reason behind adopting this is the doctrine was mainly due to one, that the reason was the hostile neighborhood. It was quite evident that Pakistan will never be friendly neighbor. Secondly, the size of the country with its neighboring countries. By this I'm concluding my video, and if you find my video interesting, kindly like, share and subscribe. Thank you.